communication is everything. And not just communicating and connecting with folks on business. A leader has to really go out of their way to forge a genuine connection with their people.
Welcome to The Training Effect, the show where we uncover how learning systems and training drive business success. I'm your host, Doug Mark, and today I'm joined by someone who has literally transformed how thousands of franchise professionals learn and grow, Katin Keirstead. As Vice President of Operations at the Junk Luggers and a certified franchise executive, Katin brings a rare combination of deep operational expertise and world-class learning and development chops. During her nearly decade-long tenure at Planet Fitness, she helped scale the brand from approximately 600 locations to over 2,500 globally, which is just that head-exploding emoji. And here's the real remarkable part. She's established and led the transformation of operational training programs that impacted over 30,000 team members. So these are big numbers. These are big accomplishments that we've seen here. So from implementing learning management systems to designing comprehensive leadership development programs to navigating the post-COVID landscape and helping recapture 97% of the membership base, Katin's work sits at the powerful intersection of franchise operations, adult learning theory, and business performance. And she's committed to one core belief, that through strategic leadership and dedication to learning and development, any organization can achieve its vision for success. Katin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you. So, Katin, your career tells a really cool story, from education and adult learning to franchise operations at scale. Not many people, I feel like, bridge those worlds really effectively. What drew you into the franchise world, especially coming from a background in education and career development and then franchising?
Yes. Well, like probably most people I've met in franchising, it happened by accident. I was looking to expand from that more traditional post-secondary career education and really branch out into corporate training. So, being local to the Seacoast, New Hampshire area, Planet Fitness was an amazing local opportunity to join a national brand.
That's awesome. For our people who are new to franchising, they may not know what a certified franchise executive designation is. What does that mean, and why did you pursue that?
Yeah, so the Certified Franchise Executive, or CFE, once I started learning about franchising and really immersing myself in franchising as a profession, I realized that was really going to be the reflection of my commitment to developing the craft of franchise leadership. And, when I think about what the CFE really means to me and sort of why I not just pursued it, but why I maintain it, what I like to say is, I'm not a fitness executive. I'm not a home services or junk removal executive. I'm a franchise executive. And I really view this as a craft that's, evolved into discovering what makes a franchise system wildly successful. And how do you apply those principles to scale a really strong concept? So the CFE itself combines so much of what I love about leadership, which is, engaging in the process of ongoing learning and development, leveling up my strategic thinking, and really dialing in processes so that we can deliver systems level excellence. So I would encourage anybody in franchising to consider it.
Look, I'm going to second that. My wife and I both walked last year. So we both got our CFEs last year, and it was really good. And it was a great reminder of sort of being on the supplier side, really getting a better understanding of the entire franchise system and process, and like the importance of not only just your documents and your FDDs and your ops manuals, but most importantly is probably following the system, I feel like. And so, yeah, I highly recommend it as well. All right, Katin, let's see. You were a part of one of the most explosive growth stories in franchising. I had reread this again a couple of different times. So Planet Fitness scaled from 600 to over 2,500 locations globally. Now, that's a massive number. It's the kind of growth that can break a training system if they're not built to scale. How do you build sort of learning infrastructure, or how can you in the future that grow with the brand at that kind of pace?
Yeah, it was really interesting when I joined Planet in 2014. it was remarkable that they had scaled to over 600 locations with sort of the training and systems that they had in place. There was no learning management system, so there was no online training. So that really made it hard for consistency in delivery of training. And, there was an operations manual, but you and I both know an ops manual isn't a training manual. And, there were PowerPoints and they were probably binders shoved into people's desk drawers. So there wasn't one aligned place where all the training lived. And there was certainly no consistency in how that training was delivered because the training programs really were dependent on the skill and knowledge of the person delivering it. The franchise operations team was incredible, like one of the best operations team in franchising. And they had really grown up in the business. So they had grown up in the clubs. I can't tell you how many, folks I worked with who were like, oh, I was hired as an overnight cleaner, which culturally is incredible, right? You have people who just bleed purple. They just believe in the mission like inside and out, but they didn't really have the skills and abilities to deliver training at a broader level and really delivering it at scale. And so really the opportunity was like evaluate what we have in training, what existed at that moment, and really go back to the basics. So, not only what existed, but what were the gaps, and so that we could start to establish a real training strategy.
I think this is probably a great segue into this next question, which is, when you joined Planet Fitness as an operations training manager back in 2014, what was the state of sort of training development and what needed to change?
Yeah. So what's interesting, when I think about what made and continues to make Planet Fitness successful, some of it's really out of the operations team's hands, right? They were disruptors. $10 a month pricing with like super strong, hilarious branding, right? You still have people, they haven't run that commercial. I pick things up and put them down in probably, 15 or more years, but people still remember like the branding, like really makes an imprint. You had these big gyms full of high quality equipment and, they were delivering just tons of value for the money. So like this great branding and this great marketing, this incredible value proposition were real differentiators. So like in my opinion, what made Planet Fitness successful to the point where I joined was really sort of out of the operations team's hands largely. But when we really had to scale to truly a nationwide brand, the operational challenge obviously is, how do you deliver this high quality customer experience consistently across hundreds and then thousands of stores? So when I looked at that initial opportunity, the first area that I needed to focus on was the customer experience. And that's what we really referred to as back to basics. It's like, how do you sell people a gym membership without being salesy? How do you take somebody who's walking through the doors of a gym who's never belonged to a gym before, who feels intimidated and scared? It took so much, courage just for them to walk through the door. So how do you make them feel welcomed and help them overcome that intimidation that they're experiencing? And then there's just the importance of building systems around cleaning. So, we have what we call the 20-minute walk around. And you have to walk around the gym every 20 minutes and you're cleaning and you're tidying up and you're filling up the cleaning solution and you're replacing paper towels and you're checking the restrooms. And, these are busy, high volume environments. Realistically, it's really important to like clean toilets constantly throughout the day. You're scrubbing showers constantly throughout the day. But most people don't love scrubbing a toilet. That's the reality. But I will say everybody likes using a clean restroom and everybody likes using a clean shower. So we really focus, when we were building out in the LMS, what we call Planet Fitness University or PFU, we started with 4 courses that were all around the why behind the systems and the brand standards and really helping to connect the team members to the why behind what we ask them to do and how that helps us deliver on really what the member wants and expects in a gym experience.
I love that. I think whenever we have the opportunity to explain the why, we have the ability to really, I think, mix our culture into our training because anyone can tell someone what to do, right? Like at the end of the day, but that's not training, that's telling. But when we're training, we're explaining, why it's important that we do that way. And some of that is for the client's benefit. Sometimes it's the employee's benefit. Sometimes it's for the employer's benefit, but understanding that why is really important. Hey, Katin, what role did the learning management system, your PFU that you just mentioned, play in enabling the sort of scale when we thought about bringing training and education to reaching 2,500 units?
Yeah. So, going through that LMS selection process, the LMS needs to deliver a branded, consistent training experience. Any LMS that you choose needs to do that. It has to allow for updates to happen easily and efficiently. It has to be user-friendly. It has to meet the learner where they are. Do they need to be able to take training on a mobile device? Or does the emphasis need to be on compliance and passing a lot of quizzes? Or, does it more need to be sort of bite-sized videos or even role plays with less of a focus on, achieving a passing score? So different LMS systems, as you know, have strengths in different areas. The LMS is the vehicle. And what I really learned is that, it doesn't matter if you have a Ferrari if you don't know how to drive it. And sometimes it's fine to have a little Hyundai hatchback, that you know how to maneuver, has great mileage. You can squeeze it into those tight little parking spaces when you need to. That's something that gets you from point A to point B. So, us going point A to point B, we were starting with disjointed, disorganized training materials, lacked a structure, lacked a clear foundation. It was heavy on content, it was a little overwhelming, and it wasn't engaging. So we needed a system that was going to be easy to use, that would really complement a club manager's daily needs and your routines. So make a tool that meets them where they are, that serves that unique need. And it's really important for me to say this. The LMS does not replace the frontline training experience. It enhances it. Once you launch an LMS, it's not oh, I never have to train my team members anymore, right? It's just extra, and it adds consistency. It adds a connection to the brand. It makes employees feel like they're part of something bigger, but it's really just sort of one tool in the toolkit of training. And it's really funny. One thing I really learned about, and this is not just LMS technology, this is any kind of technology in franchising. Technology has to be intuitive, and it's really common for a franchisor, franchise operations team, to underestimate the amount of change management and communication and training that it takes to really successfully implement, not just launch, but implement a new technology system. Even if your franchisees and the operators are begging you for new technology, it's still your responsibility to really manage and lead the change. And that's a mistake that I see a lot of, when I say I see a lot of people, I see myself making.
Yep. Well put. And you mentioned a couple of things. I've got so many nuggets when I start hearing some of these answers, and I want to expand upon all of them. But there's a couple of things in particular. One was, you talked about, delivering training, to your community, but you've got to understand what their environment is. Like you said, do they have to take this on a mobile device? Because a lot of, franchise locations don't have an office with a desktop or a series of laptops, and you may be taking courses on your phone in your truck, right? That's a real world example. And so I feel like part of the thought process when we're building content has to be, well, how is it going to be absorbed? Is it, if they have to do a lot of interacting while inside of their truck on a little, device with their thumbs, that can be kind of painful. And then the other thing that I love that you said was, look, an LMS is one tool in the toolbox, but you've got a lot of tools in that toolbox. I mean, we might start off with an operations manual, but that's not training either, right? That's a list of things you should train on, but it doesn't tell you how or why to do those things. We've got the upfront training that happens, when a new franchisee gets trained, and oftentimes you've got, a series of coaches that go out into the field. You might have weekly, bi-monthly, monthly, quarterly calls with your owners too. So there's so many different tools in this toolbox. So in your background, it said that you focus on aligning key learning KPIs with strategic objectives to drive business performance. That's kind of holy grail for most training leaders. What we're all chasing, I feel like, at the end of the day, is providing that training that actually moves the needle on the business outcomes. How do you make that connection real and then measurable?
Oh, it takes a lot, right? I'll tell you what it doesn't require. What doesn't deliver it is focusing on vanity metrics. I can look back at Planet Fitness University and say, we've had over, 3 million course completions and 30,000 learners and, 100% franchisee adoption. That's not really meaningful. That's not a measurement of the impact of the training. But it feels good. Gold feather in my cap, right? But it's not leading to necessarily meaningful outcomes. So I think really aligning learning KPIs with strategic business objectives really requires your learning and development team, whether it's a team or just a team of one, to either have a seat at the table or an executive champion and executive sponsor who's going to provide clarity around the goals of the organization and then really help define how those goals impact internal teams and external teams. Because if you think about learning and development in a traditional corporate environment, that's typically a team that's working with HR to do succession planning, to do, leadership development for the employees of the corporation. The priority for a franchise operations team really begins with training external folks. So in the beginning, a franchise training team is focusing on strategic business objectives around growing the franchise business. So adding new locations, pre-sales and grand openings, getting these new franchisees and their team set up for success, delivering what outstanding customer services, etc. So that really becomes the focus for most franchise training teams. And that's where I think franchise training often lives in operations, where I think, corporate training tends to live in HR. So when I think about that next level of aligning, once you're up and running, once you're really enabling really high level outcomes for franchisees and their teams, now you're able to, I think, internally look at how do you enable the growth of that franchise HQ. So how do you help the franchise headquarters meet their strategic business objectives around people development? So building a bench of talent to help that, the idea of a franchisor is to continue to grow. And so you're going to have internal training needs, internal development needs. And so, shifting that focus to, coordinating, delivering leadership training, facilitating 360 assessments and coaching around that, and really supporting the HR team and building that internal bench of talent that the franchisor itself really needs to continue to scale.
Yeah, I just had this aha moment just from you talking right now, which was just simply that, all KPIs are not equal. You just mentioned, something where I'm like, I look at stats sometimes on the learning Zen side of things, and I'm like, why do I care how many users went to? Like why is that a good measurement for what we're doing? And so, yeah, you're actually making me pause a little bit and think about how can I get more meaningful metrics and KPIs that we're tracking. That's awesome.
Yeah. So what I think, how do you go to that next level and develop those more meaningful KPIs? What I think it's really important from that franchise operations scope is you have to have a feedback loop with your franchise operations team. So there shouldn't be KPIs for the training team and KPIs that are distinct and separate for franchise operations team. It works really well when you have sort of a shared scorecard, because the feedback loop is, we deliver training. How do we know if the training worked? The franchise business coach goes to either, visit the location or, has a call with the franchise owner or looks at the P&L, right? And your franchise business coach is sort of that, boots in the ground that can help evaluate whether they're meeting the brand standards. They can, in some ways, be that first sort of feedback loop of whether your training is effective. And now there are always going to be other, next level feedback to tell you what's the impact of your training. So obviously, Net Promoter Score, helps you understand if you're, delivering, would your customers recommend you to a friend? Really pouring through our customer feedback and starting to see where the trends are. Like when you're pouring through customer feedback and you start to see, the treadmills were broken, or the luggers scratched my wall, or, like there's a lot of clues in customer feedback to where those training opportunities lie as well, Google reviews and everything. But, what it's helpful is when you have a shared scorecard that really combines the measurable goals for the training and the operations team. So everybody shares in the accountability and effectiveness of the training, because learning effectiveness isn't solely the responsibility of the training team. And oftentimes the franchise ops teams are really better positioned to use their relational equity, their relationship with the operators and their teams to influence an outcome. So not looking at those as two separate teams, but wherever you can combine their KPIs is best.
Would you be able to share an example where a specific training initiative directly impacted business results? Maybe that was during COVID, maybe a different time?
Yeah, I have a lot of them because I became really obsessed with measuring the impact of our training. We became a few years in, or once PFU was up and running, and it was starting to get really fun, and we're developing leadership competency frameworks, right? I became very focused on how do I measure the impact of this training. I'd say one really business specific one that was really crucial in the post-COVID recovery was training that aligned with the launch of the new mobile app, which was launched in 2020. And the mobile app launched before we closed all the gyms down for COVID. So that was great because we had this ability to continue this connection with our members, deliver, workout content, even live streaming workout content in the app. So the launch of the mobile app was a significant strategic objective for the entire organization over the course of several years. And so app adoption became a crucial lead measure for our operations team. And there were a number of KPIs that were tied to app adoption. So app adoption was tied to higher Black Card acquisition. So Black Card is the premier membership. It has tons of value. So we knew that if folks were adopting the mobile app or they were joining through the mobile app, they had a higher tendency of joining at the Black Card. We were getting prospects in our email marketing funnel, so it had positive impacts to our marketing programs. There was a membership, they allowed membership upgrades, so we had more upgrades happening through the app. There was referral reward. So if you were a member and you referred a friend and they joined, they got a reward, like a financial incentive. So it sounds like mobile app, that's really a strategic business objective. It was an incredibly important strategic business priority over the course of several years that was really tied to just a cross-functional impact KPIs, right, across the board. So how do you train on it, right? It's not about okay, here's your online course, and if you hit this button in the app, then, this is what happens. Okay, well, first of all, just download the app and play around with it yourself, right? That's really where the training is. So, yeah. You're not making some big fancy course. Pretty much anybody can just download the app and learn it for themselves. The training opportunity was, how do you get people to want to download the app? So beyond just the pull demand of delivering value in the app. It wasn't so much about new members downloading the app because it just became part of what they did. It was just part of the join process. It was more of the existing members who had, been attending the gym for years, changing their behavior. So there was a behavior change. There was a change management opportunity. And so what I looked at was, how do we equip the frontline team members with tools and resources and information to show the member what's in it for them. So what I called it was the mobile app blitz. And this is a club level effort to really drive an exponential increase in app adoption. And these were simple operational materials, not only to educate team members, but also to educate club members. So training teams don't often create materials to train your customer. So this was a little bit different. So we created a laminated how-to guide to help the member, download the app if they weren't sort of technologically adept. We had incentives to get them to trade in that, physically trade in their key card and download the app. And we held, contests across the different locations. So, again, the success of these projects doesn't happen overnight, but it happens through this, sustained, continued effort. When the app was initially launched, the adoption rate was sort of around 62, 63%. And then as a result of, implementing the mobile app blitz and then sort of the organic increase in adoption, 2-year effort really of driving adoption in club. At the end of that period, at the end of 2023, the app adoption was 89% overall. And this was across new and existing members. So, right. And that's just tied to this whole host of key performance indicators that are truly financial. Like it impacted the business across the board. So we were really proud of what we achieved with that.
Was one of the things that you could do to kind of motivate people to get the app, were you having new members sign up that way?
Yeah, we would have them either sign up through the app. One of the challenges was, when somebody walks through the doors of a gym and they're like, hey, I'm kind of interested in joining. Can you show me around? And if the first thing you ask them to do is like, sure, download our app, like that can be a real turnoff for some people. Like, whoa, I don't want to download anything. So we actually created a sort of alternative pathway for a digital join in club. It's called the digital guest register. So it was an iPad at the front desk. So it wasn't like, oh, like I'm downloading an app in my own personal device, but I'm still entering sort of the digital ecosystem.
Yeah.
This digital guest register. So again, like these were the things that you learn as you're iterating on these types of adoptions. And that's why it takes longer than you think it's going to launch to a high level of success.
What adoption numbers? That's really crazy. That's impressive, especially for an app like that. I feel like you started off at a pretty high number. 66, is that where it started off?
It was like 63%, I think, when we first started.
That's impressive to begin with. But then to get it up to 89, yeah, that's wild. Hey, what's the difference between training that checks a compliance box and training that actually changes behavior and performance?
So, when I think of compliance training, it's about meeting a requirement. So often this requirement is like external or non-negotiable. So a compliance training is going to be heavy on content. It's like an info dump. There's a lot of one-way delivery, think, preventing sexual harassment training or, that type of compliance training, right? And it's focused on what people need to know. You need to know this policy. You need to know this procedure. You need to know these rules. And there's not a lot of flexibility. You got to complete the training, sign off on the policy so HR is happy, you get your certificate, move on with your life. And it protects the brand and, it makes sure people really understand what the policy is, but it doesn't necessarily inspire people to greatness. It really tries to prevent them from screwing something up. But when I think about behavior change through training, it's really shaped around what people need to do differently. So what do you need a person to do differently as a result of this training? These are the trainings that are really relevant to their daily life. It doesn't shy away from the real world challenges they'll face week after week. Like, there are certain challenges around, hiring and firing and training and coaching and, and then you wake up on Monday and you do it all again. So the things that happen day after day after day, right? There's not usually a neat and tidy answer for everyone to follow, right? But it's more practical, real world, and it's dynamic. It involves a lot of practice and sort of real world application. And you have to be able to deliver this training in a sense that it's safe to fail. So the learner has to have the ability to fail and make mistakes in a safe environment. When I think about this type of a training, I'm asking myself, is this going to show up in the business tomorrow? Those are the trainings that are designed to be really used, woven into their day-to-day, and until it's like no longer about training. It's no longer about like, I learned X, Y, and Z on Junk Luggers University. It's about mastering a new skill where it actually just becomes an embodiment of who they are as a professional. It's just making their own. So that's where it gets really exciting, is when the training transcends the platform and really just becomes an embodiment of who they are as a professional in the brand. And then they turn around and they train. They're like, what I think is the best thing to do, and they make it their own. And that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It certainly can be, right? Like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's shift gears a little bit here. So you've got deep expertise in adult learning theory, design blended learning experiences, synchronous, asynchronous, hands-on e-learning, in-person coaching. In franchising, your learners might be franchisees who are, business owners, store managers who are frontline leaders, and team members who are just starting out. How do you design learning that works for all those different audiences? And do you design all that learning?
Yeah. So really, you have to understand and respect the role of the adult learner, and really understanding how adults learn best. The training has to be practical, immediately practical. It has to be relevant. It can't be theoretical. Like it's not like a college course on, the theory of operations. It is literally, it has within the first 10 minutes provide relevance to their day to day. It needs to be experiential. It's to the degree that you can make it experiential. It has to be like worded in the vernacular that you use in the brand. It has to be framed around the actual challenges of the day to day. And these are franchise owners. These are people who most of the time have lived a very full professional life, who have, achieved a pinnacle of success in their careers and, have decided to, take a new path and become an entrepreneur. These are not like 18-year-old college students. These are people who have like rich, broad experiences that they bring to the table. And you have to treat them accordingly. They don't come to you at square zero. The challenge is that some of your learners, when you think about frontline team members, you may have somebody who this is their first job, right? This has never worked anywhere before. They're, that frontline employee. So there is a challenge in building training that is relevant to those frontline employees and to the franchise owners. But it's really about connecting the training to the bottom line for the franchise owner, like the literal P&L bottom line, or just the day-to-day challenges that come up for your team members. Adults bring tons of experience to the table. You need to understand that. You need to respect it. They might be new to the job, but they're not new to planet Earth, right? Yeah. They didn't just like land here, right? They're not starting from zero. And if you treat them like children, you just lose them immediately. Like when you treat them like, well, I'm the one that possesses all the knowledge and you are just this empty vessel that I'm going to pour into, you just lose from the get-go. And obviously, adults want autonomy and they want respect. They don't want to be talked at. So you have to give them lots of opportunities for peer learning, for group discussion, so that they can share, like, what did they learn last week that's going to be applicable to, and they learn so much from each other. Anyone in franchising probably knows. They learn, once they're up and running, they learn a lot more from each other than they do from the franchisor. I'm sorry to break it to you all, but like they could prioritize those peer learning experiences. So anytime that you can create those peer learning experiences, first of all, you're creating something of value. And second of all, you get to observe what that learning experience looks like, and you get to benefit from that as well. So I would always say, like, don't be afraid to step back and allow them to teach and challenge each other. I do find in my experience, somebody might prove me wrong, I do find like matching up learners at similar levels of experience or sort of success makes sense. So franchise owners sort of know, like, and trust each other, and they learn from each other. Whereas, like unit level managers, regional managers, know, like, and trust each other and learn from each other. As a system grows, you just have sort of more hierarchy. As a system grows, you have people on these different levels of the career ladder. So creating experiences where they can truly learn from like a well-matched peer, in my experience, works best.
I guess this is a bit of a shift, but how do you personally decide, or really a brand decide, which training modalities to use? Like, and then also like, when do you go live? When do you do self-paced e-learning? What job aids do we use? Is it going to be micro-learning? Sort of like, are you doing this in a vacuum, or are you working with a team for that kind of?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think any franchise training professional should always put their hat on for a train the trainer methodology. So no matter, especially with live training, it's wonderful if you can have the budget to fly around the country or the world delivering the training. But the reality is you need to create a method. You need to create a system so that the people you train can train the next level and they can train the next level. So I think the step one in franchising is realizing you're not going to train everybody. Yeah. And you need to have, methodologies and systems at scale. And whether that's, asynchronous, LMS delivered training or train the trainer type of methodology, like don't figure that out 5 years into it saying like, oh, actually, I don't think there's any way I'm going to personally train 30,000 people. Like just plan for that ahead of time. That like scaling what the organization will look like in, 3 to 5 years. And then like when you decide what training modalities to use, how much time and money do you have?
Right.
I mean, I love in-person learning. There's nothing I love more than being in a room with like 100 people or 20 people who want to learn and grow and be better and achieve more. Like that's like what I just love that more than anything in this world. But, the reality is, resources and timelines and budgets don't always allow it. So how simple is the concept that you need to train on, or how complex? If it's learning that you're, applying directly in the field, right? Like a, checklist of the tools and equipment that you need in the junk truck, like don't make them log into the LMS or franchise management platform to get the job done. So, how simple is it? How easy can you make it for them to access the learning? It's not always going to be like a 2-day intensive in-person workshop. Sometimes it's like literally just a checklist that a brand new driver can jump behind the wheel of a junk truck and feel safer because they did their safety checklist. So, obviously self-paced e-learning is extremely helpful, especially in initial training. Retraining, right? E-learning is also really helpful. Like when you're hiring an executive from another industry, maybe you're hiring like a regional manager or a COO that, who comes from a different industry. It helps them get up to speed on like, not just the brand, but just like the nuts and bolts of the industry itself. Like self-paced e-learning is an incredible tool. But sometime, when you're doing sort of deep problem solving training or like conflict management training, you're trying to share like more meaningful solutions or you're trying to build culture, like really build culture, live training beats asynchronous all day.
Yeah, I was a long-time live trainer, right? And I loved that lifestyle. But eventually, the company I worked at got to scale where I was now flying around the world nonstop, to be that in-person trainer. And that was really fun for a long time. I got to see the world, but I also got burned out because of it. Hey, I think this might be a relatively easy one, but maybe not. What are the biggest mistakes you see franchisors make when they're developing training programs?
Lots of mistakes. I would say one of the biggest mistakes is when a franchisor doesn't put themselves into the learner's shoes. A franchise executive, so somebody who, is working on behalf of a franchisor, they have a very different life experience, career growth, maybe educational background than a frontline employee who just got hired in their first part-time job and just, barely graduated high school. So don't take for granted that your learners have a baseline of knowledge, especially when it comes to delivering customer service. Don't assume that they know how to answer. Don't assume that they know what a friendly tone of voice sounds like.
Yeah.
Definitely don't assume that they know how to mop the floor. Do not assume that. And I would say another mistake is when, they invest just tons of time and resources getting a perfect system up and running. So like if you're shopping for your LMS, focusing on the perfect LMS with this long timeline, shopping around for the perfect solution that's going to deliver every bell and whistle. And, you need every executive to sign off and, approvals by like just too many stakeholders that really drags it out.
Yeah.
Because I think that's rooted in this belief that the technology or the LMS is going to solve all of your problems out of the box. I really think starting with the top maybe 3 to 5 absolutely critical elements, like what's the most important to you in delivering training for your brand? when we were building the initial Planet Fitness University, we knew we were going to be scaling, and we need immediately to support 600 locations on day one. So multiply 600 locations by, I don't know, 12 or 15 team members, high turnover environment, opening 150, 200 locations a year. So for us, we needed a solution that the price wasn't going to break the bank, that our data was, protected. One franchise group wouldn't be viewing another, franchise group. But, they would have the appropriate level of access and visibility to their organization. We need to be able to log completion and have accessible reporting to the HQ and the team in the field. But we didn't need really sophisticated, virtual reality role play type of, you know what I mean? We realized to meet this timeline and to meet that initial need of the launch, it was, it's progress over perfection.
That notion of sort of starting off with the perfect solution is really hard to deliver on the end. And yeah, I often talk to people and I'm like, where can you get some wins early on? Like, what would actually move the needle? What would change the business? How could you make the owners' lives a little bit better? Or how could you make them a little bit more profitable? Or they had to deal with less turnover, whatever those are. Each person's business is going to be different on what those things are. But if you can figure out, how can we get some wins so that we can deliver it out to our community, they're going to say, oh, this was effective. Yeah. I think that's often what it comes down to is, can you get those early wins so that we can get adoption and buy-in? So, hey, you develop a lot of different materials, right? Infographics, manuals, e-learning, in-person courses. How do you know what format is going to be the most effective for any given audience?
If you can create an emotional connection with the learner, I know that seems silly when we're talking about like a laminated infographic, I get it. But if you can create an emotional connection with the learner, that's where you're going to just drive real impact. So if you create a piece of collateral that makes a new driver feel safe behind the wheel and they feel more ready to hit the road, or a fitness trainer, if you make them proud because they conducted a fitness training class and they know that it's the highlight of the gym member's day, right? Or if you can provide a manager with like an actionable plan that helps them create like a culture of inclusion and belonging on their team, then the training will lead to a change in behavior because the team member wants to. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's totally not easy. And that's why, we're here.
All right, Katin, let's switch gears a little bit here. You led diverse operations teams across the country, worked cross-functionally with subject matter experts, and drove major organizational transformative initiatives. These kind of things require a different kind of leadership, especially when your team is not in the same office, which is what we see in franchising a lot. What have you learned about leading distributed teams and driving change in a complex franchise organization?
Communication is everything. And not just communicating and connecting with folks on business. A leader has to really go out of their way to forge a genuine connection with their people. I know leaders are super, super busy. They wear their busyness like a badge, and it's really easy to get caught up as an executive, a busy executive, and not make that connection. So whatever you need to do to remind yourself to make that human connection is crucial. In my experience, it is harder for me to convey that I care about people and make that connection if I'm not in the room with them. Yeah. So when we can build that intentionally, like for example, building that intentionally into meetings, it's really helpful. So we build it into our meetings by, either opening a meeting by sharing good news, both personally and professionally, prompting some silly icebreaker questions, not going, off the rails, but taking 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of every single meeting to make that genuine human connection. It's really important.
I love that. We start all of our meetings with a rose and a thorn. And sometimes they may not be open sharing and they'll just keep it short and sweet. And other times you can realize that, well, they're really going through it right now. And I learned a lot about them. And that took a lot of courage to share that with their team. And yeah, I love what that does to the culture internally, but just by asking those simple things. Oh.
And I think really selecting a communication platform itself is being, not just like stumbling into something because it's what you use in your previous job, I think is really important. I realize is when you're texting your team members, there's like, it's almost like a violation of some kind of boundary, right? Whereas if you bring that communication into in a platform like a Slack or a Teams or whatever works for you all, it provides visibility across multiple teams, multiple groups. It provides visibility across time zones. I think like what you select for your communication platform for your team is really important. It's also, as the leader, particularly, it's important for you to set the expectation with your teams on, how and when you will communicate. Yep. And then how and when you expect them to respond. I mean, a good rule of thumb in franchising, especially with an owner, is never make them wait more than 24 hours for a response. But I also think it's really important to respect your team's boundaries. I try not to message after hours on weekends, but sometimes that's the reality in operations in a 24-hour business. So, setting reasonable understanding as a leader of, who really does need to be accessible and when. An FBC might need to be available beyond normal business hours, but your project manager probably doesn't.
Right.
So like and even saying like, I may email you on the weekend. I have no expectation of you responding to me until Monday morning.
Yeah. Just explaining that and putting that out there. I love that. All right. You talk about ensuring every team member's voice is valued, is heard. How do you actually do that when you've got a massive organization at scale?
So I will tell you, one of the most effective ways I've learned how to do that is to apply a system like EOS. So we run on entrepreneurial operating system. So we really, a key element of EOS is how you structure your level 10 meetings is what they're called. So I have weekly meetings with our operations team. We have weekly meetings with our leadership team. Each team has weekly L10 meetings. And this is not a top-down meeting at all. This is a structure that not only like enables cross-functional and up and down communication, but it actually requires it. So, we're rotating facilitators. This isn't like, my opportunity to come talk at you. We have a guest facilitator every week. We walk through our headlines, team gives each other shout outs. Everybody reports on their scorecard. So, KPIs are front and center every week. Anything that's off kilter, we bring to discussion in the meeting. We update on our objectives and key results and making sure that people are making progress in their areas of their quarterly goals. If they're off track, like we bring that into the conversation, which is called an IDS. It stands for issue, discussion, and solution. So that like through the course of the structured meeting, we're celebrating the wins, we're identifying any like outliers or concerns. Or anywhere where people are stuck in the process of attaining their goals. And then we bring that to the IDS conversation. That's the bulk of the meeting is the IDS. And that really helps us make sure that we are shaking out every single issue and getting to the root cause, but also celebrating the wins every week.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love how open of a communication channel that provides. Is this your first EOS experience, or was Planet Fitness an EOS company as well?
Planet wasn't. And I did, I think Planet's probably a little too big. For what I know about EOS, it's probably a little too big at this point to run it effectively. Probably could run it within a team, but it may be more difficult to run it on that broader scale. But I always, as a leader, structured, team meetings in a collaborative way. But I guess what I learned is when you can have all the best of intentions, as a leader to be inclusive and invite people to share their voice. But a structure like an L10 format meeting, it organically, it happens because of the street. It has to happen.
Yeah, it has to, right? Yeah. All right. So we've reached the portion of our podcast where we can do a couple of questions. So I'm going to rapid fire a couple at you. One piece of advice every franchisor needs to hear about training and development.
The answers to all of your questions are in the field. Stop hiding in your office. Stop just sitting in meeting after meeting. Go be where the people are. It's like in the middle, in the Little Mermaid. I want to be where the people are. Okay. Like go there. The answers are in the field.
I love that. All right. A common belief about franchise training that you wish people would let go of.
That it's just always about producing new content. There's plenty of content out there. And if you're using AI, you can churn out endless amounts of content. But what you really need to do is apply your own creativity and focus on really what sets your brand apart.
One metric every franchise system should be tracking related to training.
Unit level profitability.
We hear it at every conference. Unit level profitability. Make your owner successful and your system is going to be successful.
That's it. The way to scale up a successful franchise is to establish and perfect the system and develop the brand standards, but you have to provide the system, the training and the solutions to enable them to not only deliver on the brand standards and the brand promise, but you have to train franchise owners how to really manage and understand their cash flow.
That's really good. What excites you most about your new journey with the Junk Luggers?
Oh, man. So my grandfather was a junk man. Okay. So I like to say I have junk in my blood. So it's very much a full circle experience for me. I worked on my grandpa's junk truck back in the day when he was spending money and I had, my work gloves and I would jump in the front of the truck. And so like, I feel like it's a very full service, full circle moment for me. But what I'm really excited about with the Junk Luggers is our mission to keep reusable items out of the landfill. We see especially in the United States, we live in a consumerist society, and we can buy it now with one click from Amazon or Wayfair or you name it. So keeping valuable, useful items out of the landfill and creating an opportunity for a circular economy where we not only remove items from people's homes, but we connect them with a new home for those items. I'm so excited about the potential of this brand.
That is awesome. Last question. I mentioned I was going to try to do something that was local. What would be the regional food dish of New Hampshire?
New Hampshire specifically.
Yeah, right? Like we don't get to glom onto the lobster roll or buffalo wings, or right? So I'm asking this because I don't know.
I'm going to say it's a New England pot roast. I made one on Sunday for the Patriots game. Classic pot roast, not in a crock pot, not in the Instant Pot. It's in the Dutch oven. What is this in my mind? And not with the potatoes in the pot, served over mashed potatoes.
Wow. I like that answer a lot. Katin, this has been incredibly valuable. You are a wealth of knowledge and expertise in your industry. You're passionate about training and education. We love all of those things. Anybody who wants to connect with you, learn more about your work, explore opportunities with Authority Brands, where should they go?
Go to my LinkedIn. I try to stay active on LinkedIn. And if you send me a request, I surely will add you.
All right. Thank you so much. I feel like this has been a masterclass conversation with Katin Keirstead about what it really takes to build training systems that scale, drive performance, and unlock human potential across franchise organizations. If you'd like to connect with Katin, find her on LinkedIn. You can connect on Authority Brands. If this episode resonated with you, please follow, share with a friend. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, sir.
Thank you.